The sky over New York was a burning sea of red and orange as the alien ships descended like harbingers of doom. Captain Elena Graves stood at the helm of the Aegis, staring at the unfolding chaos on Earth's surface. The once proud cities of humanity were now falling, one by one, beneath the merciless assault of the Zelrath. Their ships, vast and impenetrable, had breached Earth's atmosphere, unleashing relentless bombardments on every major population center. There was no question. The planet was losing the war. Elena gripped the console in front of her, feeling the pulse of the Aegis under her fingertips. She could hear the distant sounds of laser fire and explosions through the hull. A quick glance at the tactical display confirmed her fears. Humanity's resistance was crumbling. The Zelrath were too advanced, their war machines too powerful. But she wouldn't surrender. Not yet. Not while there was breath in her lungs. Captain Graves, Commander Jackson's voice crackled through the comms, his tone a mix of urgency and determination. The Northern Fleet has been wiped out. We're the last of the line. Elena's jaw clenched. They were all that remained, the Aegis and its ragtag crew. Earth's entire defense network had fallen in less than 2 weeks. Humanity's once proud military was reduced to this, an isolated warship fighting a battle it couldn't win. But the mission wasn't over. It couldn't be. "Prepare the last strike formation," Elena commanded, her voice cold and resolute. "We're getting their flagship full force. If we can cripple their command ship, maybe we can buy Earth sometime. We've got nothing left to lose." "Aye, Captain," Jackson responded, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "We'll give them hell." As the Aegis broke through Earth's atmosphere, the battle raged on outside the shielded windows. Zelrath warships loomed ahead, their hulls gleaming with deadly precision. The humans fought with everything they had, but it was clear they were outclassed at every turn. Elena's heart ached for the countless soldiers she had once commanded, the families and civilians who would be lost forever. But she couldn't afford to dwell on it now. There was still one last chance for humanity. The Aegis tore through the void, its engines screaming as it powered toward the Zelrath flagship, the towering vessel that acted as both command center and executioner. She could see it now, its dark silhouette looming in the distance, flanked by an armada of smaller ships. The time for subtlety had passed. Targeting their weak points, Elena muttered, watching as her crew worked frantically to fire every last weapon they had. "Lock on the primary shields, then unleash everything we've got." "Locked on," Jackson said. "Firing now." A flash of blinding light filled the bridge as the Aegis unleashed a barrage of missiles and laser fire, hurtling toward the Zelrath flagship. For a moment, Elena thought they might have a chance, until the flagship's shields flared to life, absorbing the attack with ease. The Aegis rocked violently as retaliatory fire slammed into the hull, sending sparks and shards of metal flying across the bridge. "Shields down to 50%, shouted one of the crew. "We can't take another hit like that." Elena gritted her teeth. They couldn't back down. This was their one shot. The Aegis was their last hope. All engines full throttle. Push us into their weak spot. The ship lurched as its engines roared, surging forward with a force that rattled the crew. Elena's knuckles turned white as she gripped the controls, every ounce of her being focused on the task ahead. She didn't know if this would be their final charge, but she knew they had to go all in. She could already hear the sirens blaring, the countdown ticking toward inevitable doom. "Captain, we're not going to make it," Jackson shouted, panic creeping into his voice. But Elena's resolve was ironclad. She'd seen too much suffering, too much loss. She couldn't let humanity's story end like this. Not without a fight. "Do it now," she ordered. In the moments that followed, the Aegis launched one final devastating volley at the Selrath flagship, sending all remaining firepower in a desperate bid to bring it down. The explosion rippled through space, momentarily lighting up the void with a brilliant flash. But it was not enough. The flagship held firm. Before Elena could issue another command, the Aegis took a direct hit to its engines, throwing the ship into a violent spin. Sparks flew as alarms blared, and Elena was thrown from her seat, slamming against the console. Her vision blurred. She struggled to stay conscious, her mind racing. She had to survive, for Earth, for humanity. But it was already too late. The Aegis was going down. When Captain Elena Graves regained consciousness, she was no longer on the bridge. The acrid scent of smoke and burnt circuitry filled the air, and her head throbbed with the weight of the impact. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. The Aegis was silent, its once mighty engines now nothing but a smouldering wreck. The dim emergency lights flickered weakly overhead. "Elena, respond." Jackson's voice crackled weakly through the comms, his voice strained but still alive. "I'm here," she rasped, her voice hoarse. She struggled to her feet, the low gravity making her stumble. "Status report." "We've lost half the crew," Jackson reported, his voice grim. "The remaining survivors are scattered, and the ship's integrity is compromised. The Aegis can't stay in one piece much longer. We're not in orbit anymore. We've drifted far out into deep space." Her heart sank. The Aegis had been humanity's last hope, and now it was a dying husk. Elena grabbed onto the console for support, the weight of their situation crashing down on her. Her mission had failed. Earth was lost. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice tight with forced calm. "A small, uncharted moon," Jackson said. "The sensors didn't pick it up before we lost power. The debris field from the battles masked the signal. It's a dead moon. No signs of life." Elena stared at the monitors, seeing the endless stretch of dark space surrounding them. She didn't even know how far they'd drifted. It was just the black void and the lifeless rock ahead. But there was something faint. A pulse of energy, barely detectable, flickered across the console. "Commander," Elena said, her voice growing stronger with renewed purpose. "I need you to run diagnostics on all systems. Find a way to get us some power. I'm going to investigate that signal." Jackson hesitated. "Captain, that's not a priority right now. We need to stabilize the ship." "Now, Commander." Elena's tone was sharp, the command undeniable. "This might be the only chance we have left. We'll fix the ship later. First, I need to know what's out there. That signal could be our way out. Do it." There was a brief silence before Jackson replied. "Understood. I'll start the diagnostics now." Elena pushed herself off the console and made her way toward the ship's airlock. Every step felt like an eternity, her muscles aching from the impact and the strain of the past few hours. But she didn't have time to waste. If there was any chance of survival, she had to take it. The airlock doors hissed open, and Elena stepped into the cold of the unknown. The surface of the moon was barren, covered in a thick layer of dust and rock. She was still in her combat suit, but the weight of her armor made her movements sluggish. Her boots crunched softly against the dust as she walked toward the source of the energy pulse, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it be a remnant of human technology? Or something older, something alien? As she approached the source, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. Elena froze, every instinct screaming at her to retreat. A sudden, blinding light erupted from the depths of the moon's surface, and Elena staggered back, shielding her eyes. The light intensified, pulsing in rhythmic bursts, and then, with a final, thunderous roar, the surface cracked open. Beneath the moon's crust lay something far more than a simple structure, an enormous chamber, ancient and untouched by time. A dark silhouette emerged from the depths, its shape slowly taking form as the light began to fade. For a moment, Elena's breath caught in her throat. It was massive, a relic of a civilization that had long since vanished. A towering figure, mechanical in nature, yet undeniably human in design. Its surface was pocked with age and wear, but it was unmistakable. It was a guardian. The AI core, dormant for centuries, began to hum to life. Its deep, mechanical voice resonated in her mind, as if speaking directly to her. Humanity has returned. The words sent a chill down her spine. This was not just a machine. It was a protector, a relic from humanity's past. A weapon designed to defend Earth in times of unimaginable peril. And now, Earth had fallen. But perhaps, just perhaps, this guardian held the key to turning the tide. Elena's mind raced. She had no idea what this thing could do, or what it wanted. But she knew one thing for sure: she was not alone in this fight. And the last remnants of humanity were not without hope. She stepped forward, toward the guardian, her resolve hardening. Activate. The chamber trembled as the guardian's eyes glowed a brilliant blue. The war for Earth was far from over. The guardian's eyes, vast, glowing orbs of deep azure, slowly came to life as Elena approached. Its massive form towered above her, its humanoid shape made of intricately layered metal, both ancient and eerily pristine despite the ravages of time. As the blue light pulsed from its core, Elena felt an unfamiliar weight in the air, a tangible hum that seemed to resonate with her very bones. The voice, deep and omnipresent, filled her mind again. Humanity has returned. Elena swallowed hard, her heart hammering in her chest. The eye was aware of her presence, but she had no idea how it had remained dormant all these years. Her pulse quickened. Was this the salvation she had hoped for, or something darker? What was its purpose? And how could it help her now? Who? What are you? Elena whispered, still reeling from the intensity of the moment. The guardian's mechanical body shifted, its movements slow but deliberate. I am the guardian, protector of Earth. My purpose, to ensure humanity's survival. The voice carried an ancient authority, its tone calming yet commanding. Her mind braced. Earth. Earth was gone, decimated by the Selrath invasion. Was this relic truly meant to protect it? Or was it a relic of an age that no longer had relevance? The guardian's voice echoed in her mind again, as if sensing her confusion. You are the last of your kind, Captain Elena Graves. The last of Earth's defenders. But you are not alone. I will aid you in the fight. Aid me. Elena muttered, her gaze darting over the massive form of the guardian, its glowing eyes locked on her. You mean you want to fight the Selrath? I exist to protect humanity, to preserve your existence. The Selrath are an existential threat. They must be eradicated. Elena's mind struggled to comprehend. The guardian spoke with the cold logic of a machine, but there was something almost human in its words, a sense of empathy, even if distant. The Selrath were too powerful for any conventional human resistance, but this ancient weapon, perhaps the last of its kind, could shift the balance. What do I need to do? Elena asked, her voice determined, the wariness of her situation sharpening her focus. She had no time for hesitation or second thoughts. Earth had fallen, but this guardian could be the only way to stand a chance at reclaiming the future. The guardian's form shifted once again, and Elena could hear mechanical parts clicking as it activated some internal mechanism. The ground around them hummed with power. "I require restoration, Captain Graves. I am not fully operational. The components necessary to restore my full power are scattered. I can guide you to them. Together, we will fight back." Restoration. That word echoed in her mind. Elena wasn't sure what was required to bring the Guardian to full power, but if it meant turning the tide of the war, she had no choice. She needed answers. Humanity needed answers. "How long has this technology been dormant?" she asked, her gaze shifting from the Guardian to the desolate moon around them. "Centuries," the Guardian answered simply. "I was created by a previous iteration of humanity, an ancient civilization long lost to time. My activation was designed for such a moment as this." Elena's heart skipped a beat. An ancient civilization. The thought of a humanity that once stood so advanced, so powerful, sent a wave of both awe and dread through her. Could there really have been a time when humans had the means to defend against galactic threats, before Earth's decline? The implication was staggering. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "You said the components to restore your full power are scattered. Where are they? How do we find them?" The Guardian's eyes flickered, and a series of holographic maps and data streams appeared before her, projected in the air. "There are 4 known locations where these components may reside. Each is hidden, either in distant star systems or buried within lost colonies. The Selwarath will not sit idle. They will hunt us. We must move quickly." Elena's pulse quickened. 4 locations. A scattered hunt for pieces that could restore Earth's last hope. Her thoughts flashed to the Aegis, to the crew she had lost, to the world that had already been shattered. They were outnumbered. They were alone. But now they had a chance. She had a chance. "Give me the coordinates," Elena said, her voice firm and resolute. "I'll find them. And I'll make sure humanity gets the future it deserves." The Guardian's eyes glowed brighter, as if in approval. "I will guide you, Captain Graves. Together, we will defeat the Telrath." With that, the chamber fell into silence once more, save for the low hum of the Guardian's awakening power. Elena turned, her mind already racing ahead to the journey she would have to undertake. She didn't know if she was ready for what lay ahead, but it didn't matter. Earth's survival depended on it. Humanity's survival depended on it. She set her gaze toward the distant stars, her path now clear. There was no turning back. The cold void of space stretched out before Elena as she stood at the helm of the Aegis. The ship, though battered and scarred, had been restored just enough to carry them on their desperate journey. The Guardian, now fully awakened and active within the ship's systems, had taken the lead in repairing the critical systems. But the Aegis was still a far cry from its former glory, and Elena knew every moment spent in space without the full power of their unknown ally was a moment closer to the Selwrath finding them. The first destination the Guardian had provided was a distant system, far outside the reach of Earth's former territories. Its map had pinpointed an old human colony, a place abandoned centuries ago, long before the Selwrath had arrived, a place that, according to the Guardian, held the first component they needed. Elena clenched her jaw, trying to suppress the anxiety that gnawed at her. There were many unknowns. First and foremost, the Selwrath were hunting them. The Aegis was a speck in the vastness of space, but they were still too close to the remnants of Earth's defense network. It wouldn't take long for the Selrath to detect the ship's faint energy signature. "Approaching the coordinates," said Jackson from the tactical station, his voice steady but laced with an underlying tension. "Reading minimal activity in the system. No sign of Selrath patrols. Yet." "Stay alert," Elena ordered, her voice a steady anchor to the growing unease. "We don't know what's waiting for us." The ship's engines hummed softly as they entered the outskirts of the abandoned colony's system. The sensor screens flickered briefly before stabilizing, revealing a lonely planet orbiting a dead star. The once thriving human colony had long since fallen into ruin, but there, on the planet's surface, was a small solitary structure, nearly buried in dust and debris. A faint pulse of energy emanated from within it, no doubt the first component they needed. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Prepare for landing." "Jackson, I need a full scan of the area. If there's any resistance—" "There's something else," Jackson interrupted. "We're not alone." Elena froze, her stomach dropping. A series of faint signals flickered on the scanner. Ships, old and hidden in the shadows of the planet's moons. They were out there watching. "Who are they?" Elena demanded, turning sharply to face Jackson. Her mind was racing. Could they be survivors? Or worse, another faction, one with their own agenda? "Unknown," Jackson said, his fingers dancing over the controls as the sensor readouts displayed nothing but static. "But they've been here longer than we have. They've been watching the colony, keeping it under surveillance. And, Captain, these ships are not human. I can't identify them." The air in the bridge seemed to grow heavy as Elena processed the information. It was no coincidence. The Guardian had said nothing about another faction, but this discovery couldn't be ignored. These ships could be enemies. Or worse, they could be remnants of the relics. The secret faction Elena had only heard whispers of in the rebellion's final days. The relics were known to be a mysterious group that had kept humanity's old secrets hidden, working in the shadows even before the Selrath invasion. The Guardian had only vaguely referenced them, but Elena had always suspected they had a hand in humanity's fall. Their true allegiance, and their role in Earth's fate, was uncertain. But if they had been here all along, if they had been waiting for something, it was no longer a question of if they would be a threat. They already were. "Prepare for a possible engagement," Elena said, her mind kicking into tactical mode. "Send a transmission to them. Offer parley, but be ready for anything. And get me a secure channel to the Guardian." Jackson hesitated for a moment before his fingers flew across the console. "Sending now." There was a long silence. Elena stood in the center of the bridge, her eyes scanning the view screen as the mysterious ships hung in orbit, unmoving. It felt like they were waiting for her, watching her every move. She could feel the weight of their attention like an invisible pressure pushing down on her. Then the comms buzzed to life. A distorted voice crackled over the intercom, sending a chill down Elena's spine. It was low, menacing. "This is the Relic Fleet. Identify yourself." Elena's grip tightened on the console. This was no ordinary group of survivors. The relics were ancient, but their motives were shrouded in mystery. She wasn't sure if they would be allies or foes, but one thing was clear: they weren't here to help. Elena straightened, ready to face whatever came next. "I'm Captain Elena Graves, commanding the Aegis, and I seek your cooperation. We need the components of a lost weapon, one that can destroy the Selrath. I won't ask again. We need your help." There was a long pause. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "You are far from home, Captain Graves, and your fight is not ours. But perhaps there is something you can offer us." The tension in the air tightened, as if the entire ship was holding its breath. Elena's every instinct told her this was just the beginning of something much larger and much more dangerous. The relics were about to reveal their true hand. The voice from the comms grew colder, as though it were made of the very void of space itself. Elena could hear the subtle undertones of calculation beneath the words, as if the person on the other side of the transmission were weighing every syllable before it left their lips. "You seek our help, Captain Graves, but what you offer us in return?" The voice was male, smooth, but there was an edge of steel to it. Someone who had seen too much to be easily persuaded by pleasantries. Elena's pulse quickened. She had to think fast. The Guardians' power could turn the tide in their favor, but she didn't know if the relics would simply hand over the components or if they were expecting something more from her. There was no time to waste. Every second they spent here, more Selrath ships could be on their way. "I have nothing to offer except the future of humanity," Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos that churned beneath the surface of her thoughts. "That Selrath are unstoppable, and the Earth is lost. If we don't stand together, we all fall. I'm asking for your cooperation in defeating them." A long silence followed, thick with tension. Elena's mind raced. She knew the relics had their own agenda. There had to be something they wanted, something that could tip the scales in their favor. The problem was, she didn't know what that was yet. The voice on the other end finally spoke, low and deliberate. "Humanity's survival is no longer a certainty, Captain Graves. But you're right about one thing. You cannot defeat the Selrath alone. The components you seek are not just relics of war. They are the remnants of a weapon that can shatter entire fleets. That weapon, however, comes with a price. A price that, until now, no one has been willing to pay." Elena's brow furrowed. The Aegis scans had only indicated fragments of the weapon's potential. The Guardian had suggested it could give humanity a fighting chance, but there was no mention of any hidden cost. She swallowed, her grip tightening on the edge of the comms panel. "What price?" she demanded, her voice hard. The voice from the comms paused, then spoke again, sore now, as if savoring the moment of tension. "The weapon's activation requires the sacrifice of something more than mere resources or technology. It demands the essence of those who seek it. The power to control it, to wield it against the Selrath, lies in the blood of those who would harness it. Your blood, Captain Graves." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Her breath caught in her throat as she struggled to process the implications. She had heard rumors of ancient weapons that demanded a life to fuel them, rituals that required the sacrifice of a leader's soul, their spirit, even their very life force to activate. But this was different. This was real. "You're asking me to sacrifice myself." Elena's voice was barely a whisper, though her hands clenched into fists. "What kind of monster would ask for that? To sacrifice my life for a weapon?" "It is not a question of choice," the voice replied coldly. "It is the nature of the weapon. You asked for our help, Captain Graves, but in return we require your commitment to this cause. The weapon must be activated, and it will only be activated by your blood. If you are unwilling, then you will have no chance of succeeding." Elena's mind reeled. She wasn't sure she could believe the relics, if they were manipulating her, or if they truly held the key to defeating the Selrath. But the words haunted her, the reality of the situation crashing into her like a tidal wave. The future of humanity rested on her shoulders, and yet the price for victory was her very life. She could feel the weight of it, the burden of leadership, the knowledge that Earth's last hope had always rested on the edge of such a choice. She thought of her crew, her fallen comrades, of the families that would never know peace again. Was this the fate she was destined to meet? A life sacrificed for the chance of survival. There was no time for doubt that Selrath had already taken everything, and she couldn't allow them to take the future too. "I'll do it," Elena said, her voice firm, resolute. She barely recognized the words as they left her mouth, but she knew in her heart they were the right ones. "I'll pay the price. Activate the weapon." A long pause followed, as though the voice on the other end was testing her resolve. Finally it spoke again, softer this time, but with a strange reverence. "Then you understand the weight of your decision, Captain Graves. Very well. The components you seek are yours, but you must act swiftly. That Selrath are closing in on your location. Your time is running out." Without another word, the transmission cut off. The comms panel went silent, and Elena was left standing alone in the quiet, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to face the rest of the crew, who had been listening to the exchange in silence. Jackson, his face pale but composed, met her gaze. He didn't speak, but his eyes conveyed everything she needed to know. He was with her, no matter the cost. She looked around the bridge at the remnants of humanity who had chosen to stand with her. For them, for Earth, for everyone who had already lost so much, there was no turning back now. The final stage of the fight had begun. The Aegis shuddered as its engines roared to life, the hull groaning under the strain of its battered frame. Elena stood before the command chair, her mind still reeling from the revelation she had just accepted. The relics had shown their hand. The weapon, humanity's final hope, could only be activated by her life. Her blood. She didn't know whether to feel rage or relief, but there was no time for either. The Selrath were already closing in. They had no choice but to act now, to move fast and decisively. Jackson's voice cut through the tension, his tone calm but urgent. "Captain, the relics have provided us with the coordinates to the first component. We're en route, but there's a major complication." Elena glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "What kind of complication?" Jackson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the display in front of him. A dark patch on the star map blinked ominously. A fleet of Selrath ships, easily 10 times the size of the Aegis, was heading straight for their location. They were closing fast, far too fast for the Aegis to outrun them. "They've detected us," Jackson continued. "They're almost on top of us, and the relics aren't going to help us with this." Elena's grip tightened on the edge of the command chair. "We don't need their help. We just need to get the first component and get out of here. We'll deal with the rest later." "Understood," Jackson said, his fingers flying across the controls. "I'm preparing a defensive strategy, Captain. But we'll need to make a blind jump to avoid the Selrath fleet. We won't have time to navigate the debris field around the colony." "Do it," Elena said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "We don't have a choice. Prepare for an emergency jump." The tension in the air thickened as Jackson set the course. The crew fell silent, each person focused on their stations, knowing that their chances of survival rested on a hope that was quickly dwindling. Outside the viewport, the stars blurred as the Aegis surged forward, entering the warp field. The ship trembled, the sound of strained metal echoing through the bridge. "Brace for impact," Elena ordered, gripping the armrests tightly. She had no idea where they were going, or what would await them when they arrived, but it didn't matter. They had no other options. The Aegis lurched violently, and the world outside the bridge became a swirl of colors, a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. For a few heart-stopping moments, Elena felt as though her entire body had been torn apart by the jump. The ship's hull groaned, the tremors rattling every inch of the vessel. And then, as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The violent spinning sensation vanished. The stars outside the viewport steadied, and Elena exhaled slowly, her breath shaking. They had made it, for now. Jackson's voice came through, tight with relief. "We're clear of the Selrath fleet. But we're in a new system, Captain. We're at the coordinates, but—" Elena didn't wait for him to finish. She stood, her eyes scanning the readouts, the holographic map displaying the barren planet they had jumped to. The surface was covered in jagged canyons and volcanic peaks, a desolate place that seemed to pulse with the remnants of ancient energy. "Looks like we've made it to our destination," Elena said. "Let's move out. All hands, prepare for landing." "Captain," Jackson said, his voice more cautious now. "There's something strange. The readings from the surface, they're fluctuating. It's like the planet itself is alive." Elena turned to face him, her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "There's an energy signature, strange, unpredictable. It's almost as if something on the surface is resonating with the Guardian's technology. I can't explain it, but it's not like anything we've seen before." Elena's heart skipped. Was this another trap? Were the relics manipulating them, sending them to a place where they could be ambushed, or worse, to a place where they couldn't survive? "We'll take the risk," Elena said, shaking off the doubts that threatened to cloud her judgment. "We've come this far. We're not turning back now." The Aegis descended toward the surface, the planet's gravity tugging at the ship, pulling it down with increasing force. Elena stared out the viewport, watching the jagged surface of the planet loom closer. The canyon that awaited them was deep, and the volcanic rock crumbled with an eerie sense of quiet destruction. Once the landing thrusters engaged, the ship jolted violently. The Aegis skidded along the rocky surface before coming to a screeching halt. The ship's engines groaned in protest, but it held together. "Landing complete," Jackson said. "We've made it, but we're not alone." Elena's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "Scanners are picking up movement near the landing site," Jackson said. "Something is coming toward us. I can't get a clear read on what it is, but it's moving fast. You might want to be ready for anything." Elena stood, her hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm at her belt. "Get to the airlock. Stay sharp, everyone." The crew moved quickly, the tension in the air palpable. As Elena moved toward the exit, she couldn't shake the feeling that the planet they had just landed on was far more dangerous than it appeared. But they were so close now. With one last deep breath, she activated the airlock, and the heavy doors hissed open. Outside, the barren planet awaited them, its strange energy crackling in the air. And from the shadows, something moved, something old, something powerful. The heavy air of the alien planet pressed down on Elena as she stepped into the dust-choked landscape. The world seemed lifeless, yet there was an undeniable energy beneath the surface, a pulse in the air that made her skin tingle. The jagged canyons stretched out before her, their dark silhouettes casting long shadows under the twin moons above. The ground was uneven, covered in sharp rocks and volcanic remnants, but it was the energy readings that unnerved her the most. They had intensified since they landed, fluctuating wildly as if something was stirring beneath them. Behind her, the Aegis loomed like a silent sentinel, its broken hull seeming to blend with the harsh landscape. The ship had barely survived the crash landing, its outer plating scratched and scorched from the rough descent, but it was still intact. For now. "Scanners are still picking up movement." Jackson's voice came over the comms, his tone tense. "Whatever it is, it's closing in fast. and it doesn't look like anything we've encountered before. Elena's hand instinctively went to the pulse rifle slung across her back as she surveyed the surrounding terrain. The wind howled, kicking up dust and making it harder to see more than a few meters ahead. The temperature had dropped sharply since their descent, the chill seeping into their bones as the air around them grew thicker with energy. She could feel it now, the hum, almost like a distant heartbeat echoing through the ground beneath her feet. "Stay alert," she ordered. "We don't know what's out there. Move out, and keep your eyes open for any sign of the component. Jackson, you're with me." The team fanned out, their boots crunching against the rocky surface as they advanced cautiously, their weapons raised. The eerie quiet of the place seemed unnatural, as if the very world was holding its breath. And yet, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, and for a moment, the faintest shadow flitted across the edge of her vision. She blinked, but it was gone. Jackson moved close beside her, his eyes scanning the environment. "Captain, these readings. They're unlike anything I've seen before. The energy on this planet seems tied to the landscape itself. I think the entire planet is a massive energy conduit, one that could have been harnessed by whoever built this place." "Who built it?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The relics." Jackson hesitated. "Could be. Or something even older. This planet isn't just abandoned, it's forgotten. Whatever civilization was here, they left something behind. Something powerful." They came to a jagged ridge, a natural rock formation that offered a good vantage point. Elena moved to the edge and peered down, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the valley below. There, at the center, was a vast, ruined structure. It looked ancient, eroded by time and neglect, but its sheer scale was awe-inspiring. A temple of sorts, its spires rising like the bones of a forgotten titan. And at its heart, a pulsating light flickered. "That's where we need to go," Elena said, pointing to the structure. "It's the source of the energy readings. If the component is anywhere, it's there." Jackson nodded. "But we'll need to move quickly. Whatever's coming, it's getting closer." As if on cue, a low rumble vibrated through the ground beneath them. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The sound was not natural, it was mechanical. The ground trembled, as if some ancient engine had awakened deep below. Something huge, something alive was stirring. A dark shape appeared at the edge of their vision, a silhouette moving swiftly through the dust and shadow. The crew tensed, weapons raised. Elena's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. It was coming closer. Out of the swirling dust, a creature emerged, a hulking, grotesque figure. Its massive body was armored in a strange, organic material that pulsed with the same energy they had been detecting. Its eyes glowed a sickly green, and from its back, tendrils of crackling energy flared, snapping and whipping in the air like living lightning. "Is that a machine?" Jackson asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Or something worse?" Elena didn't answer. She was too focused on the creature's movements. It wasn't just a machine, it was a sentinel. A guardian, perhaps, left to protect the temple and whatever lay within. The creature's head turned slowly, its glowing eyes fixing on Elena and her team. For a moment, there was silence, an unbearable stillness that hung in the air. Then, without warning, it lunged. "Move!" Elena shouted as she instinctively pulled the trigger on her pulse rifle. A burst of energy hit the creature square in the chest, but it barely flinched. The blast left a singed mark on its armor, but it only seemed to make it angrier. The creature retaliated with a blast of energy from its tendrils, sending the team scattering in every direction. Elena ducked just in time, the bolt of energy grazing the edge of her armor. The heat of it singed her skin, and she hissed in pain, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Get to cover," she ordered, as the creature advanced, its steps shaking the ground. "We need to keep it distracted long enough to reach the temple." Jackson and the others scrambled, firing shots at the creature, but the blasts had little effect. It was too tough, too powerful. The energy field around it seemed to deflect everything they threw at it. "We can't stop it like this," Jackson said, his voice tight. "We need a plan." Elena's mind raced. The temple was their only hope. Whatever it contained could be their salvation. But first, they needed to get past this creature. And the longer they waited, the closer the rest of the enemies would be. "We'll have to take it down," Elena said, her voice hardening with resolve. "But not with guns. Jackson, I need you to figure out a way to disrupt its energy field. The rest of us will make a distraction." Jackson nodded, understanding her plan. On it. As the creature lunged again, Elena sprinted forward, her team following behind her, ready to face whatever came next. The creature's tendrils crackled with violent energy as it charged again, the ground shaking beneath its massive feet. Elena's heart raced, but her focus remained sharp. There was no retreat. There was no turning back. The temple, the key to their survival, was within their grasp. They just had to make it through this. "Move!" Elena shouted, diving to the side as the creature swung its massive tendrils in a wide arc. The energy blast missed her by inches, but it sent a blast of heat and force that knocked her to the ground. The impact rattled her bones, but she rolled to her feet, her pulse rifle raised, firing a rapid series of shots. They impacted against the creature's armored hide, but it barely seemed to notice. "Jackson!" she barked, barely able to hear herself over the sound of the battle. "Do you have it?" "Almost there." Jackson's voice came back through her comms, tight and tense. He was already making his move, weaving through the rocks to find a position from which he could work his tech. The creature, its movements erratic and unpredictable, swiveled toward him with a deafening roar. Without thinking, Elena launched herself toward the creature, diving into the line of fire to intercept the creature's focus, buying Jackson enough time to do his work. The pulse rifle in her hands fired off another round of shots, but this time her goal was clear. Distract, not kill. The creature whipped its tendrils back, unleashing a blinding flash of energy in her direction. Elena felt the heat on her face just before she rolled, narrowly avoiding the blast. The energy splintered against the ground where she had been seconds before, leaving a molten scar on the surface. "Keep moving," Elena shouted as the team split up, each person weaving in and out of the creature's reach, trying to outmaneuver its devastating attacks. One of the crew, Miller, caught a tendril across the chest, and Elena heard the unmistakable crack of ribs breaking. He collapsed to the ground, but his comrades were already by his side, pulling him to safety. "Get him to cover," Elena ordered. She didn't have time to check on Miller. There was no one else to lead them forward. Jackson was the only hope they had now. She fired again, her shots snapping off in rapid succession, as she maneuvered around the creature, keeping its attention on her and her team. The creature's jagged mouth opened in a silent snarl, and Elena realized the glowing green in its eyes was becoming more intense. It was preparing for another strike, this one far more powerful. Just then, Jackson's voice crackled over her comms. "I've got it." Before Elena could ask what he meant, a surge of energy erupted from the creature. It was a direct hit aimed at her. But before it reached her, the energy field around the creature rippled and pulsed, flickering like a failing light. The creature halted, stumbling in confusion. It didn't understand. It wasn't supposed to be vulnerable. Jackson's voice was full of triumph. I found a way to disrupt its energy field. It's vulnerable now, at least for a few seconds. Now, everyone, attack! Elena screamed. The team rallied. With the creature's defenses compromised, the remaining members of the crew moved in with weapons drawn, firing everything they had at the beast. Pulse rounds, grenades, anything that could penetrate its hardened exterior. Elena herself was at the front of the assault, her rifle blazing. She could feel the surge of adrenaline pushing her forward, every shot hitting its mark. The creature howled in agony as it staggered back, its tendrils flailing wildly. But Elena knew that it wouldn't last long. This was their one and only chance to defeat the creature and make it to the temple. Jackson, can you stabilize it? Elena shouted over the comms as she watched the creature's defenses flicker again, the energy signature unstable. I can try, but I can't guarantee it. Jackson yelled back. Do it anyway, Elena ordered. The creature's glowing eyes locked onto her, and Elena saw it charge once more, faster than before. It was an act of desperation, a final attempt to strike down the threat it perceived. Just as it lunged, Elena dove forward, firing her weapon one last time. The shot hit squarely in the creature's central core, where its energy field converged. The pulse rippled out, and for a moment, everything froze. The creature let out a deafening, ear-piercing screech, its form collapsing in on itself as its energy field imploded. The light in its eyes dimmed to nothingness, and then, like a collapsing star, the creature disintegrated into a cloud of ash and debris. For a few seconds, there was only silence, the heavy, oppressive silence of the planet's forgotten landscape. Is it over? Miller's voice came through, weak but alive, as his team dragged him into cover. Elena stood motionless, surveying the wreckage of the creature. Her chest heaved with exertion, her mind racing, but she couldn't afford to relax, not yet. Not yet, she muttered. We still have a long way to go. The temple loomed ahead, its glowing core still pulsing with energy. With the creature down, they could finally move forward. But Elena knew the real battle was yet to come. That Selrath fleet would be closing in, and the relic's weapon still required a sacrifice, her sacrifice. She glanced back at her team, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they were in it together. Let's move, she said, her voice firm. This is it. They set off toward the temple, the weight of their task pressing down on them with every step. The final stand had begun.